Hi, hello, kia ora. It's Heather Morris here coming to you on my Monday evening, 9 p.m. Time for a chat. Now, as I'm never quite sure exactly when these things start, I've spent about the last 10 seconds just saying hello, and that will do for now. Welcome to all of those who have tuned into me live, and for those who may subsequently watch this after the event. They call me an author, a writer. I'm not quite sure sometimes what I've done to be given that title, but I will have it and I will wear it for now. Now, one of the things that I learnt from my very first book, and given that I've only got two so far, that's a good lesson to have learnt, and I learnt it well, was that as a writer, we can sit in front of our computer and we can spend months, in some cases years, banging out our stories. And they exist just as that, as words on a screen or on a piece of paper if you happen to go and print it off, which I do, by the way, because I really need to prefer to read it on paper rather than on screen. But then comes that day that we all hold out for. It's the day that your publisher says to you, here's your cover, here's your book cover. And now I get to share with you the cover for my next book, Stories of Hope. Here it is, folks. And, it makes me so proud to be able to show this to you and to, talk a little bit more about it. So there it is, Stories of Hope. Look at them. It's got a side and it's even got a back. I'm not sure if that's what the final product will look like. There may be a little bit more, particularly on the back as we get through. But this story now is with what they say that the copy readers, the proofreaders in London. And it's not quite finished. I'm pretty sure that it'll bounce back to me with some instructions of, please rewrite this, work with this. We need more on this. And that's fine. But for me, it has gone off from me and my editor to that next level. And the cover has been revealed tonight, right now. So that is huge. So I get to sit back for 10 to 12 days and wait to see what's going to come my way. It would be nice to think I could just sit back, and I thought, what will I do? I know, I'll break out a jigsaw puzzle, a big 1,500 piece jigsaw puzzle, because I don't have to write. I didn't break out the jigsaw puzzle, and I took about 2 or 3 days off, family time, but then my mind and my brain started going to the next story, the next book, because it's already up here and it's already in the pipeline, shall we say, because I had been in the position of meeting 2 of the 3 people that I'm writing about. And my mind now is going to, okay, how do I start looking at that story? So I'm possibly jumping ahead, but you know where I jumped to? I jumped to that part of writing that I love the most, and that is the research. That is finding out all these amazing backstories and facts that worked to be able to enable me to write fiction. I do have to get the facts. And from there I went, well, where's my research take me? Well, it takes me to Israel, and as soon as we can get Qantas in the air and I can be vaccinated, those are my 2 criteria, then of course I will be back in Israel. But there's one other place I'll be going to. My beloved Slovakia. Back to Košice. Back to the hotel there that I've stayed now a couple of times, and the people I've met there. And the people from Krupaki. Of course I've had to go to Krupaki. That's a given. But going back to Košice is where I need to go to another little town, about an hour away. Everything's an hour away from Košice. Runoff Nad Topolo. I'm told there are 2 runoffs in Slovakia. The Nad Topolo, where I'm going, means it's the runoff that has a river through it. And that is where I need to go to be able to do the research, look at the properties, look at the documents that I'm hoping the lovely, lovely researchers I have in Krupaki will unveil for me. And when I'm thinking now of going back to Slovakia and being in Koshita and Vranov, Nautaplo, I think about my last trip there, and that was for Silka. And, it'll never be out of my head, but right now I'm still very much wanting to talk about Silka and how I went about finding out that personal part to her story. Of course, we had the Auschwitz and the Gulag part, but that personal part which I got from Koshita. Now, I've written about it in here as well, and so you can read my description of being in Koshita and Sabinov and Badajov. But I thought I'd just share another little story about my time there. Koshita is the city, the biggest city near these small towns that has accommodation, so that's where I stay anyway. Now, last time I went there to be able to spend more time with Silka's neighbours and friends, a strange thing happened. I love coincidences. I had a brilliant one today too. I'll get back to that, maybe. But here's another coincidence that happened. I was going there via London, and I was picking up, shall we say, my editor, Margaret, in London, who was coming to Koshita and to Sabinov and Badajov with me. Oh, and Krumpaki. Don't forget Krumpaki. And about a week, 10 days before I left to go to London and to meet with her, she wrote to tell me that she had had one of these amazing coincidences. She had been at her children's school and talking to a parent there, and had mentioned to that parent, I'm going to Koshita in Slovakia. And this parent went, but that's where I come from. I come from Koshita. They got talking, and it transpired that this parent, his brother still lived in Koshita. And guess what? He ran the bookshop there. He owned the bookshop, or one of them. There's two there. And so conversations went backwards and forwards, and he wrote and told his brother, and the brother said, yes, he has the book. It's The Tattooist of Auschwitz, of course, we're talking about, because Silka hadn't gone to the publishers yet. After a few days and a few emails, and I arrived in London, and we're about ready to go to Slovakia, or to Koshita, and we get a request from the brother who lives in Koshita, who has the bookshop. Would it be possible for me to come and do an event, talk to whoever turned up? And of course I said yes. But after a couple of days of being in Koshita and doing the research that we had to do, this gentleman in his bookshop, he put a flyer in his window that I would be there on this day. He was going to shut his shop an hour early. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And anybody who happened to walk past his bookshop saw the flyer were welcome to come along and to meet me and hear me talk about the tattooist and Lali. Not knowing what we were going to get in terms of numbers, we just had to wing it. So on the day or the afternoon of the talk I was going to give, I met with the gentleman, the translator, who was going to be interviewing me and translating, of course, to whoever turned up. Well, we put a few chairs out and a few more chairs, and within a very short period of time, as it approached 4 o'clock, the place was full. People were standing in the back. Now, I'm telling you this because this was one of the funniest and most beautiful talks I have done. This impromptu talk in a little bookshop in Koshita. Sat down with the translator, and he introduced me and spoke a little bit about it, asked me a question, and I started answering them. However, it became very obvious quite quickly that he wasn't quite as good at translating English as maybe he could have or should have been. You've got to remember, this guy got roped into the last minute. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 people who were sitting in the audience, they started translating into English what it was my translator was having trouble doing. And so people within the audience, they started asking questions, and it all became very ad hoc. And out of this, these 2 ladies in particular who could understand and speak English very well and translate very well, they got caught up in the moment of it. And before I knew it, not only were they translating whatever I said, but people were asking them questions about my book, and they were just answering them. Thankfully, they had read it, so they were able to do it. And so what happened was it kind of degenerated into this overwhelming sort of free for all of everybody talking a little bit to me, but a lot to these two ladies who could answer the questions that I couldn't because I wasn't getting a really good translation back. It went on for, I think, close to an hour. It was a really beautiful, wonderful experience. Everybody was laughing and giggling at the translations, at what was being said. And, uh, and I talk about this in my book. Then something happened. I was winding up and I said, look, the reason I'm here is because my next book is called Silka's Journey. A little elderly gentleman, he was little, I don't mean to belittle him by saying that, but he's quite tiny. He was sitting in about the second or third row back, and this little hand went up, and he said in broken English, are you talking about Cecilia Kovakova? Now, I didn't say the name Cecilia, I just said the name Silka. And I said, yes, I am. Did you know her? And he said, she was my neighbour. His name is Michael. And I said to Michael, would you just wait and can I have a chat to you after? And he agreed. Now, we chatted some more and there was some cups of teas and coffee going around, but thankfully Michael waited. And then I got to sit down and chat with this gentleman. Now, Michael had been only a young boy, and by young I think he was 6 or 7, when the Jewish people in Slovakia were being rounded up and taken away. He happened to be visiting his grandmother when they came and took his parents and other siblings. And his grandparents were able to hide him outside of Bratislava where they were living. Now Michael spent those next 3 years being hidden in farmhouse to farmhouse, some Jewish as they were being taken, given to non-Jewish people. And he told me about his survival as a young boy, but also, of course, the loss of all his family. And then we got on to Silka, Cecilia, and he told me how he and her were the only 2 Jewish people in the building, the apartment building where they lived. And so they gathered together whenever they could, and they had that safety in being able to talk about and acknowledge and recognize significant Jewish days and holidays. And he said, my biggest regret is, he said, the number of times she and I talked about the 2 of us going to Israel. That's what we wanted to do, and we never got to do it. But because I needed to go to Koshita to be able to research Silka, and my editor met a man at her children's school who came from Koshita, who had a brother who had a bookshop, and that I did an impromptu talk to just whoever walked in off the street that day, having seen just a flyer in the window. I got to meet this other amazing man and hear his story and have all that fun that I had with those amazing people, with my poor translator being sort of sidelined actually. He joined in a little bit when he could because he saw that we were having too much fun and he didn't want to miss out on it all. But it really was a delightful event in terms of ad hoc, just absolutely engaging with the people who were there. And that's what you've got to do. Well, I have to do when I don't speak the language. I've got my one word, my one Slovakian word, Ďakujem, and I say it so often when I am there because I am grateful and I am thankful to the people in Slovakia, Košita, Krompaki, Sabanov, Bardejov, and hopefully very soon people I will meet in front of Nod Tapalo. I've gone away from the book, haven't I? But elements of what's in here, and that's what I'm writing about, is meeting people who you don't know you're going to meet them and taking that chance to engage with them and listen to them and listen to the people around them and the laughter and all the stories that just evolve because one person puts himself out, makes himself vulnerable, and says something. Michael said something to me, and everybody else got engaged, and I have his story. Now, one of the things I was thinking about a couple of days ago too, when I was writing about the importance of listening to people who've got stories, and that story, it's not going to go anywhere 9 times out of 10 when you do talk to somebody. You're just going to hear it and appreciate the bravery it took to tell you. And it got me thinking because somebody wrote and asked me a question. Was there anything in Lully's story that I left out? And of course there was a lot I left out, mostly because it was just too much. 3 years of his time was a lot to condense down into just one novel. But I got thinking about the things that I did leave out. Now, many of them, it was because the elements were already there anyway. They were already being touched on in other parts of his time, and there was no point in repeating conversations that he had with Boretsky on this day that he then had a month later and a year later. I'm talking about that sort of thing. But there were also 1 or 2 things that Lully said to me, I don't want you to write about this. And it got me thinking that when you're not a professional and you haven't taken any oath, Hippocratic or otherwise, to maintain confidentiality with what you hear, if, and in my case, like I did, you hear something and the person telling you says, I don't want you to tell anybody else about this or don't write about this, then the importance of maintaining that faith to that person and the trust they gave to you to tell you something that will go no further. And for the record, there is quite a few things that Lully told me that will not go any further. They've even been erased from notes on my computer because he trusted me to not only tell his story, but also to keep confidential elements of his story that he just needed to share with me and no one else. So in telling stories of hope and writing stories of hope and writing Silke's story and in writing the book that I will now go to work on once I get permission to, okay, yes, it's done, it's dusted, it's gone to the printers. Only then can I start really engaging in my next story and putting the words down. But if there's anything I hear from the people involved that they just want me to hear because it enables them to round out their story, then of course it will be held in the strictest of confidence. And in telling me stories like that, that's how I know that I have the trust of these people, and I must honour that trust. So Stories of Hope, with its cover, with all the little storylines in it. I've introduced you to my great-grandfather. I've now told you about Michael. Other parts of my story and my journey, I talk about it when I'm giving these live events, and it's sometimes I go, now what have I told here? Because I tend to find so much that I cannot say it in an hour or even an hour and a half, 2 hours. You've got to remember, I spent 3 years with Lully. And I spent over a year researching and writing Silke's story. Same with this one, same with the next. And all these lovely little vignettes that happened to me. Maybe I'm being a bit selfish here, wanting to hang on to some of them. But bits of them come out and you will hear them in bits and pieces, which is, I think, kind of a good way for me to share them. Because I get to hang on to them, just their mind for just a little bit longer. But I do want you to know them. The story of sitting with the prisoners in London and what that meant to me to be trusted by these men incarcerated and to have them share with me stories of their family. You know, one little element I will tell you about, and it's in the book too, But it relates to when I'd finished talking to the prisoners, the 100 men who gathered in the room with me for a couple of hours, and I went and had lunch with about half a dozen or so of the men. And yeah, I've had prison grub. It's not bad. But one of the prisoners there with a couple of wardens, they said to me and to the person from my publisher who was there with me, they said, would you like to go and see a cell? And this gentleman said, look, if that's okay, we'll take you to show you my cell. And so, okay, yeah, why not? I hadn't been in a prison cell before. I was curious to see what one was like. And so we walked through all the locked areas, the gates, the gardens, and we got into the cell block where all the individual cells were, and we got taken to this man's cell. And as we were walking towards it, he'd been quite open with me, telling me over lunch why he was there. I never asked any of the prisoners there anything about their incarceration or the reason they were there. But he wanted to tell me, and so I had just listened and vaguely commented. But I did ask him on the way to the cell, I said, can you just tell me, how does it feel? What is it really like to be locked up in a small confined space? And he looked at me and he went, am I locked up, am I? I said, oh yeah, come on, very funny. He said, no. He said, are you telling me that door into my cell is locked? I said, I looked to the warden and I said, isn't it? And the warden went, uh-huh, it is. And he said, well, how about that then? He said, you know what? I have never tried to open it, so I actually don't know that it's locked. And if I never try and open it, then to me, in my head, I can walk out that door whenever I feel like it. But I don't feel like it, so I'm going to stay where I am. Like, what a great mentality. Look, I'm going to put it out there, he'd been there already 7 years. But to him, he was surviving by playing his own mind game of not feeling locked up. He felt free to express himself. He felt free to go and go and do the work that he had to do each day. He did like the library, which is why he was one of the people who got to meet me. But it was this other aspect to him which was so inspiring almost. It was enlightening. Yeah, you know what? If you don't think of yourself as being locked up, be it in a cell, be in the confines of your home right now, where we're all meant to be still in isolation of sorts, that it can come down to a mentality. You know, the other thing he said to me, I feel like I'm royalty here. And I've looked around at the barbed wire fences, and this was a maximum security prison or medium security prison. So she was pretty tight, okay? And I went, royalty, now you're going to have to explain that one to me too. He said, well, in 7 years, I've never had to open or close a door. Somebody does it for me everywhere I go. I just walk through like I'm the Queen of England. And I looked at him and went, okay, the King of England. I get it. These were little things that he had taken on board. He had the biggest smile on his face the whole time I was with him. He talked about being inspired by things he was reading, by the other men that he engaged with, and even by the prison authorities. I think he was accepting the fact that he was here for a reason and that he was doing his time, and he didn't seem to argue about that. We'll leave that for now. But many times I've thought about him and thought about that whole notion of being locked up and the practical side of it versus the mental, emotional side of it. And when I think of him and I think of that ability to be able to say, no, if I don't open that door, then I don't try, then I'm not in isolation. I had to do 2 weeks of what was called total isolation last month when I got back from America, because I got back and the whole COVID thing had blown up, and part of my returning from California was to be locked up in my own home with only people bringing me food that I could pick up outside my door. And after the first 48 hours of thinking, I'm not liking this, this is not me, there's my car and I can't get in it. And then I thought of this man and I went, okay, it's okay. Because like him, but a lot sooner than him, I was going to be able to walk out of the door and not just pick up the food that had been left on the step, but get in my car and drive away. And then from that point on, the remaining 12 or 13 days that I had of total isolation, I loved it. I relaxed. I would write, I would read, I would watch television, I would stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning and sleep until lunchtime. I just gave myself the freedom to enjoy this time and not be caught up in it being locked up, being in isolation. And that is the word. But up here, I was free. And yes, okay, I could also walk out my back door and sit on my veranda and look out into the forest beyond. So slightly different, but I couldn't get in my car and drive off somewhere. And hey, I'm somebody that pretty much gets to get in her car and drive off, be it shopping, be it visiting. I know, not writing, but like a lot of writers, we're very good procrastinators, and one of the best ways for me to deal with my procrastination is to get in my car and go for a drive. So I guess that's what I'm wanting to just talk to you a little bit about tonight was, of course, revealing and showing you how very, very proud I am of this amazing cover that is going to go with this book that is coming out in September. And we'll feed more information to you about that as the next few months go by. Oh, definitely. I might actually be sitting here maybe with a glass of champagne or maybe Slivovitz in my hand the day they tell me it's gone to the printers. You're good to go. Get back into that other story now. Put that jigsaw away. You've got another story to tell. But in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy having a few days of the freedom to be able to just see my grandchildren, which actually I'm going to see quite a bit of, because my life has actually just taken this sort of giant change in the last 3 or 4 days. And while it's nice and quiet where I am right now, come tomorrow, my house will have a few extras in it. 2 more adults, 3 children, 5, 3 and 9 months, a dog and 2 cats. Yes, for the next 10 to 12 days I have to have my family staying with me as things didn't quite work out with their new home being ready on time. But can I tell you, I am so looking forward to it. I know the 5 and the 3-year-old think they're coming for a holiday, and I'm going to give them a holiday. They will be spoilt. Yes, they have to go to school, but that's neither here nor there. I'm going to have the most incredible time in the next few days, looking after as much as I can my family, including the 4-legged members. We brought one over yesterday trying to orient her a day early. She's still under the bed and won't come out. I'll go and have a chat to Biscuit in a minute. But for now, I want to thank you so much for listening. If any of you have been sending me questions while I have been talking, can I apologise for not responding to them while I have been talking to you? There's 2 reasons I'm not doing that. One, it would require me to look over there and read the question and stop my talking, and it would require me to put my glasses on, and I think I've left them upstairs. I will go and look at them now and respond to any that have come my way. And I thank you. I thank you for the time. And come next week, if there are any other questions too that you'd like to ask, then next week I will answer them. But for tonight, I wanted to just talk about stories of hope and Silka, because Silka is still very much and always will be in my head. And sharing that little part of getting her story tonight, I thought could be a nice way for me to kind of wrap up Silka's journey and now go forward into stories of hope. I will always talk about Lali and Gita and Silka, rest assured, always. But now there are others to come into my storytelling too. So thank you, Jaquiem, and same time next week. I'll see you. Good night, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you.